Hello, welcome to Understanding Stenciling, an exciting video which will help you to discover new ways of decorating your home, at the same time improving and adding value and original ideas to your surroundings. Stenciling is a totally unique, inexpensive, quick and above all easy way to decorate your home. Stencils can be used in halls and living rooms, antique or modern, bedrooms and bathrooms, kitchens and kids' rooms. In fact, every room in your home provides an opportunity to use stencils to great effect. Stencils come in all shapes and sizes. You can stencil on most surfaces, in any design, and in every colour under the rainbow. In fact, each stencil project becomes an original work of art created by you. I don't think there's ever been a time when decorating has been as easy or so much fun. My love affair with stenciling started when I was a child, playing with different shapes and colours, fascinated by a medium which required no drawing of the image I wanted to create. Many years later, growing up and wanting to start my own company, I searched for a new and exciting specialist area to develop in the home furnishings market. Chance visit, whilst in America, to the Shelburne Museum of Vermont gave me the inspiration I was looking for. Here was a reconstruction of an early pilgrim settler's home. Everywhere I looked, there was stenciling. Many new directions in today's home furnishings are recreations of bygone eras, and the application of 20th century technology to stenciling gave me the basis for the new idea I was seeking. The way in which people live has always fascinated me. One of the first requirements for an interior designer has to be to understand and relate to what the clients want in their home. Some of us like to live in cool, modern, pale colours, or stark contrasts of black and white with a minimum of possessions and furniture. There again, there are others who like a traditional style, with warm or vibrant colours, with homes over-brimming with knickknacks and the clutter that makes this home for them. Looking at the Pilgrim's house in Vermont, I realised the potential of stencils, and here I am. Stencils are a design form with total flexibility in shape, colour and style. Whilst design coordination from the home is available in a multitude of styles and colours, commercially printed furnishings definitely have their limitations. How many times have you found your ideal design, only to discover that it doesn't come in the colours you need to coordinate with your curtains or sofa? Yet, in this dilemma lies the real benefit of stenciling. You create your own colourways to coordinate with your furnishings, reaching out to the boundaries of your imagination. Understanding the medium of stenciling is the key to confident and successful stencil decoration. And in this video I'm going to share my skills and enthusiasm for stenciling with you, leading you on a journey of discovery that will change the way you think about decorating forever. I'll be showing you how to maximize the potential of stencils in easy-to-follow step-by-step directions, using what I find to be the best and easiest method, what we call dry brush stenciling, a process which requires few tools, little expense, and most importantly, no previous experience or training. With stencils, anyone can be an artist. Not only will you quickly learn to stencil, but will develop and discover creative abilities I bet you never knew you had. There can be no greater pleasure than creating a home for oneself and maybe one's family. For me, knowing that stenciling gives you the means to create the designs, and more importantly the colours specially for you, is very special, and I'm sure leads on to a greater enjoyment of your home and the lives you live there. For me, part of the fun of planning a project is working out all the different colour combinations. Every time I stencil, I still get a thrill the moment I remove the stencil and see what I have achieved. In a world where we live, surrounded by mass production, I love the hand-painted charm of stencils, which seem to me to be in total harmony with the way we live today. Sophisticated yet simple, inexpensive yet stunning, and certainly environmentally friendly. In this video, we shall be putting theory into practice, using stencils to decorate and add character to a typical family home in Norfolk. I will be taking you through and showing you a different use of stencils in each room, showing how stencils can be used in many different ways. I will also be giving you ideas on where to stencil, what designs and colours to choose, surface preparation, measuring up, stenciling itself. These are just a few of the many topics we shall be covering. And for the really adventurous, I shall be teaching you how to cut your own stencils, letting your imagination run wild. Most stencil projects can be completed in a weekend, and once you start, you'll be amazed how quickly, easy and versatile stenciling can be. Stencils can be as sophisticated or naive as you want. This is DIY at its best. But beware, once you start, it's difficult to stop. The secret to successful stenciling lies in the equipment used, and for me, the only way to stencil is using the dry brush technique pioneered in the States by Admiral Bishop. It comprises of 3 basic items: the stencil, fast-drying paints and specialist brushes. Now first, the stencil. It's basically a sheet of flexible material, usually plastic, out of which a design is being cut. To create the stencil image, apply paint to the cut-out areas and the design is formed. The main advantage of using plastic stencils is that they're light, flexible, easy to use, and being transparent, you can see exactly what you're doing, and they can bend around those awkward corners too. Once we start stenciling, you will see too how useful these printed instructions will be. The fast-drying paint is a joy to use, non-toxic and water-based. Here are the 2 basic formulas, one for most hard surfaces and the other for fabrics. A small pot like this is all you need to do one colour around an average room. Its consistency is thicker than ordinary paint, but don't be tempted to water it down. The added dryers ensure that the stenciling project is completed quickly and with no smudging. Specialist brushes come in a variety of sizes. The one you use depends on the stencil and the effect you want to achieve. They're made from top quality bristles, and if looked after with tender loving care, will see you through many, many projects. These are the 2 brushes I tend to use the most. You can use them on all average size stencils, and they hold a reasonable amount of paint. The smallest brushes are for finer details, and these bigger ones can be used on larger designs when you need to hold more paint on the brush. You can use these brushes on both hard surfaces and fabrics. And for the very enthusiastic textile stencil, we also have these specialist fabric brushes too. With stenciling, I always recommend 1 brush per colour family and separate brushes for the hard surface and fabric paint. Believe me, it's absolutely necessary to get the right tools for the job, and it's a very worthwhile investment. Once you've selected the stencil you're going to use and the surface to work on, the fun can really start. The key feature of stenciling is how little equipment one needs to begin. A stencil, in this case an English bow design, and the half dozen or so basic items which can be carried home in our shopping bag on a single visit to a DIY store. When you're working at home, make sure that you have enough space to set up all your equipment, and it can be a good idea too to protect furniture with old sheets or tablecloths. Select the paint you are going to use and the appropriate brushes. To fix the stencil in place, I favour the use of repositionable spray adhesive. It's effective, you use very little, and it prevents small pieces of the stencil moving. But do use it in a well-ventilated area, preferably near an open window. I usually keep some spare paints and brushes on hand too, in case I want to introduce some additional colours and shading. With floral motifs, this can give your work an extra special professional look, which we will see later when we are working in Richard and Caroline's house. Fold a couple of sheets of kitchen cloth into a large foil container. Take your stencil, shake the can of spray adhesive and lightly spray the back of the stencil. Wait a few seconds to let the adhesive settle. It is suitable for most surfaces, but if in doubt, test a small area first. An option to spray adhesive is to use low-tack masking tape around the stencil. This forms a barrier to prevent paint seeping over the edges. Now place the stencil on your surface and press down to ensure all parts of the stencil are attached. Shake the paint before opening and pour some into a small foil container, and don't worry when you see the paint is thicker than standard household paint. Never be tempted to use the paint direct from the pot. You'll get far too much on the brush. For this stencil I'm using a size 4 brush. Dip it into the paint, but only very lightly. Wipe off the excess onto the kitchen cloth and test it on the paper. If there's too much paint still on the brush, go back, wipe more off on the kitchen cloth, paying particular attention to the sides of the brush. This is where you often find paint lurking. Having just the right amount of paint on the brush is the key to good results, and people who are beginning to stencil are constantly amazed at just how little paint you actually need. A second test shows that the brush now holds the right amount and that it is already dry. Holding the brush like a pencil, you can now begin to fill in the cut-out areas. Using a clockwise motion, start at the outer edges and work inwards. The low-tack adhesive is great because it allows you to lift up the stencil and see how you're doing, and then press it back into place and continue. Always apply the paint lightly. Apply more pressure on the brush, or turn the brush in an anti-clockwise direction to darken the colour if you feel it needs it. When you have filled in all the cut-out areas, lift off the stencil and enjoy the beauty of what you have created. And would you believe that's all there is to it? It's already dry, and because you're using my dry brush technique, the paint shades as if by magic, giving a totally professional look, even for a first-time stenciler. Basic stencils, like the English bow, fit on one sheet of plastic, but more complex designs can be separated onto 2 or more sheets. When you're using stencils which are colour separated, they always carry letters or numbers to indicate the sequence in which they should be used. It's important that this sequence should always be followed. This is because parts of the first colour are sometimes printed on the second. These are registration marks and act as a guide when repositioning the stencil. Start by stenciling sheet 1 or A. Here I'm stenciling the ribbons and flowers in pink, filling in all the cut-out areas. I'm varying the pressure on my brush, which helps to achieve the shaded effect. Remove the stencil, the paint is already dry, and we can continue immediately. These registration marks represent some of the design I've just stenciled. Use the dotted lines to place the stencil on top of the last stenciled section. They ensure the design is exactly in the right place. Another wonderful advantage of plastic see-through stencils. Load the brush with more paint if necessary and continue stenciling. Lift up the stencil to check and continue along the surface. The registration marks of the second stencil line up exactly with the first colour. Stencil away. Here I'm using green for the leaves, and I can check to see how the 2 colours relate together. Once I'm satisfied with the effect, I continue until all the cut-out areas are filled in. Remove the stencil, and a 2-colour stencil design has been created. Shading with 2 or more colours gives more depth and interest to stenciling. Now I'm going to show you how to create a 2-tone effect on the ribbons. For the first pink, I used a size 4 brush, but for shading I'm now going to use a smaller size 2 brush. I've selected a darker red colour, although you can achieve different colours for shading by mixing your basic colour with black or white. If you want a 2-tone or mixed colour shaded effect, you must ensure your base colour is very pale. Load up the brush and lightly stencil, filling in the cut-out areas at random. Don't fill in all the spaces. It's the irregularity of colour that makes the shading so effective. Remove the stencil and see the additional depth and quality the shading gives the design. I've used a darker shade of pink to give a 2-tone effect, but the mixing of 2 colours, say red on top of yellow, is equally effective. There's one thing, but the proof of the pudding is putting it all into practice, and of course it's here that all the fun starts. When planning a stencil project, I always assemble all the various components and pin them on the notice board. Fabrics, photographs, colours, stencils, it's all like a big jigsaw that piece by piece falls into place. Driving up to the house of Richard and Caroline and their young son Ben on a bright summer's day, Susie and I were busy discussing the projects ahead of us, a whole house to stencil. Richard and Caroline have done the basic decorating, The curtains, bed covers, sofas and furniture are already here, and it's giving us the perfect opportunity to use stencils in so many different ways. I always think that as you enter a house, it's important that the hall makes you feel welcome. After all, it's the hall that gives you the first impression of the house you're entering. It's important to consider a hall as a room in its own right. It's somewhere one passes through a lot, but actually very rarely spends any time in. The main characteristics of a hall are the doors, the stairs, usually few walls and little space to put any furniture. But let's for a moment consider some basic principles of decorating which one should also use when stenciling. One of the first things to consider is the effect you're actually trying to achieve. Do you have any design restrictions? What colours do you have, and maybe what colours would you like to add? What are the good points and what are the bad points? With stenciling, you can draw attention to the good points and improve the weak ones. All these things should be taken into account when considering what stenciling to use. This house is set in rural Norfolk, and its timber beams and doors lend itself to a country theme in decorating, which in turn sets the theme for the rest of the stenciling throughout the house. Opening the door into a stenciled hall, the country theme I discussed has been created with an intertwining ribbon and leaf border design. The ribbons are stenciled in blue to coordinate with the carpet, and the terracotta leaves echo the subtle tones of the wood. Faced with the fact that there was not enough space, due to the beams and number of doors, to stencil around the walls, we focused the stenciling around the kitchen and front door, which gives the hall an unusual and interesting decorating scheme. Awkward items like the doorbell above the kitchen door make an interesting focal point. Note one of the leaves used at random above the barometer. The English bow stencil draws attention to a lovely drawing of the house. Moving upstairs, more random leaves from the main stencil lead one's eye to the new print room above. To show you some other examples of stenciling, I've selected some of my favourite photographs. Stencil paints come in a wide range of colours, but no matter how large the selection, there will always be times when you will want to mix your own colour. This might appear daunting, but by knowing a few basic rules and learning a few tricks of the trade, a whole new world of colour can open up before you. The three basic primary colours are red, yellow and blue. When you mix two of the primary colours, you produce secondary colours. Red and yellow make orange, blue and yellow make green, and so on. Moving on, if you combine a primary and a secondary colour, you produce a tertiary colour. For instance, blue and green make turquoise. There are two ways of making a colour paler. If you want a tint, add the colour to white, and if you want a paler shade, add white to the colour. Similarly, if you want to make a colour darker, just add a drop of black. It's only by experimenting that you will see what can be achieved by mixing colours together. If you mix an individual colour, though, for stenciling, do mix enough to complete the project, and any extra can be stored in an airtight jam jar. Living rooms present an interesting challenge when decorating because they tend to have a multitude of different uses. Is it a room that's used mainly during the day or in the evening? Is it reserved for entertaining, or does the whole family congregate here? Is it a formal room or an informal room? Richard and Carolyn tend to use this room for entertaining and for watching TV, as Richard has a separate study and Ben can also use his bedroom upstairs as a playroom. It's also the most spacious room in the house. You have the white walls continuing the theme from the hall, a blue carpet and the lovely wooden beams. For me, though, the most interesting point is this inglenook brick fireplace, which provides a wonderful central focal point for the rest of the room, and everything else seems to work from it. Another interesting theme to pick up on for the decorating is the fact that these lovely floral curtains with a blue background coordinate with the sofas and chairs and give us a lot of scope to play with when deciding what stencils to use. My inclination here is to take inspiration from the stencil design from the flowers on the furnishing fabric, You can have great fun playing with all the different colours. There's blues, greens, pinks and yellows, and we could have a lot of fun here. Like in the hall, we have the restriction of the wooden beams, so it's not possible to do a border going all the way around the room. This means one can do something really different and exciting. And what I've decided to do is to use the flowing floral stencil design based on the centre of the curtain pole, and then weaving and trailing its way to the end of the curtain pole and then trailing down the side, which I think will make a very unusual and pretty decorative effect. And then if I'm feeling really inspired, I'm going to stencil the cushions as a final finishing detail. Here I want to show you the effects of shading with two different colours, using the same stencil and different ways of stenciling flowers. As I explained before, I work from the centre of the surface, stenciling first to the left and then to the right. I apply the first stencil, in this case the leaves, and stencil in the green. Then, without removing the stencil, I shade in a heather lilac colour using a separate brush. This combination of heather on green gives an unusual and dramatic effect. Next, part 2 of the stencil, the flowers. Here, to reflect the floral colours in the fabric, I shall stencil alternate flowers in yellows and pinks. Each colour uses a different brush, first the yellow and then the pink. I might later go back and shade with a darker pink over both colours to give extra interest, but I want to see the overall effect before making a decision. What a transformation! The stencils have had the effect of creating more colour in the room, but in no way overpowering the rest of the decoration. Following my plans, the stencil has only been used above the curtain poles. I did in fact stencil a darker pink over both flowers. Note the depth it gives the design combined with the two-tone leaves. At the corners I've used only the leaves to trail down above the lights. The cushions are stenciled in a coordinating design and colours. Looking across to the middle window, see how effective the stencil is in coordinating all the colours used in the sofa and curtain design. An additional focal point is created by rehanging 3 pictures above the music cabinet and stenciling the same design used on the cushions in colours again echoing the sofa and curtain design. Using my dry brush technique, you can stencil on walls, floors, furniture and small objects, in fact anything that does not have a high gloss surface. With floors, let the paint settle for around 4 days and then give the floor 4 to 6 coats of good quality varnish. Coordinate the furniture with the walls, using related colours and the same stencil. Teach your children using stencils. Stencil a rug and give this old chest a new lease of life with these colourful circus designs. Stencils used on low ceilings can make small rooms appear larger. Stenciled wall panels expand the size of a room and here add additional detail to the mirror. Panels again, this time stenciled on cupboard doors, giving the effect of traditional mouldings. Floral motifs on these doors coordinate with the fabric design. And finally, roses decorate this stunning stenciled bath, and by using the same colours, the walls and rug are stenciled to complete the decorating scheme. Studies are rooms with many functions and used by different age groups. This particular study is mainly used by Richard as a home office, but Ben is very fond of playing games on his father's computer. The box-like shape of the room lends itself to a geometric border stencil, picking out the colours of the blue and white striped curtains. Once stenciled, this room looks twice the size. The strong geometric lines echo the stripes in the curtains. The mid-blue has been used as the main colour, with accents of grey and navy to balance the design. Traditional in concept, but modern in its interpretation, this Navajo design gives the study both style and character. Plastic stencils are durable, and if looked after with care, will see you through many projects. However, if one does get damaged, it can easily be repaired. Place the torn stencil on a cutting mat. Cut small pieces of masking tape from a longer strip and stick them over the tear until it is secure. Cut away any extra unwanted tape with a cutting knife following the outline of the design. For larger tears, the masking tape can be used on both sides to strengthen the stencil. Dining rooms come in all different shapes and sizes. Sometimes they're an individual room, sometimes adjoining a living room, or perhaps a kitchen. Here, the theme from the living room has been carried through, using the same curtains and carpet throughout the eating area. But it's also part of the open-plan kitchen. The Crisps had the opportunity to use the space either as a formal dining room or as a family eating area. One of the most exciting aspects of stenciling is its flexibility and the ability to create colour combinations unique to each room's individual needs. So, here in the dining area, we're going to use the same stencil design, but pick out different colours from the curtains. And to complete the picture, we'll even continue the theme into the kitchen, but to ring the change, only use the leaves to give an effective, but now monotone border design above the units and windows. Continuing the stencil from the living room, we've used a subtle change of colour. The leaves have the same pale green base, but are now shaded with blue. The small comma-like motifs are also stenciled in the plain blue colour. Both flowers are now stenciled in yellow and shaded with 2 tones of pink. It all adds up to give a new dimension to the use of this design. Nothing is safe from stencils here. These placemats and napkins have been stenciled to coordinate with the china and cutlery. Now, see how the stencil adapts for use in the kitchen. Note how the complete dining room stencil continues and then moves into the kitchen using only the leaf part of the design. Would you ever believe it's the same stencil? The leaves are shaded in greens and blues. Used like this, the stencil gives the effect of a motif-like border. It has been the most perfect design to use in 3 linking but very different rooms. And an added bonus is how good the stencil looks when seen from the hall. Fabric stenciling is a fun way to accessorize rooms with items which are perfectly coordinated to your decor. Natural cottons are the best fabrics to use for stenciling. This includes plain linens, silks, calicos and chintz. However, fabrics such as wool, mohair and cloths with a high synthetic content or textured surfaces are definitely not recommended. If you're in doubt, and even if you're not, it's always advisable to test a small sample first. Most fabrics can be pre-washed, and make sure you iron your fabric before starting to get rid of any creases. There's absolutely nothing worse than coming across a great ridge in the middle of your stencil. Basically, the technique is identical to hard surface stenciling. The only difference is you start with a damp brush. Pour a little water onto some kitchen cloth. I'm using a special fabric brush. Note the twine and longer bristles. Wipe the brush several times across the damp cloth and wipe off any excess on the palm of your hand. The paint should once again be poured into small foil containers and, if necessary, mixed with an orange stick. As before, dip the brush into the paint and wipe off any excess onto the kitchen cloth. Remember to load your brush and work the colour well into the bristles. Test it on a sample piece of fabric, and when you're happy, start stenciling. Fabrics are easy to stencil, but you should ensure that you use the right paints, as some leave a skin on the fabric surface. You can always check your work. Often, with fabrics, the paint looks pale through the stencil, but is in fact darker once the stencil is removed. Move on to the second colour using a different brush, remembering to dampen it before you begin. This is only when you start a colour though, and not when refilling your brush with paint. Once is enough. Again, dip the brush in the paint, wipe off the excess, remembering to work the paint well into the bristles, and test before starting. This time I'm stenciling the yellow very lightly, as I intend to use a red to shade the pears, adding depth to the design. Yellow is a great base colour for shading. I'm deliberately applying the paint lightly to leave gaps for the colour to breathe and space to build up the shaded colour. Here it is slightly darker, where I'll be leaving it plain yellow to balance the shaded areas. Leave the stencil in place. Dip a third brush in the red paint, wipe off the excess, test, and then get going. The red is used sparingly, shaded on top of the yellow. As on hard surfaces, the paint dries instantly, and the red is particularly effective used over this yellow. Stenciled fabrics can be heat sealed in two ways, either by ironing without steam on the stenciled images for 25 to 30 seconds at the settings suitable for the fabric used, or, if a large area has been stenciled, take it to your local laundrette and put it in a hot dryer for 45 minutes. Whichever method you choose, ensure that you leave the stenciled fabric for a minimum of 24 hours before heat sealing, and use one of your stenciled test fabrics to check the paint is completely dry and not affected by the heat of an iron or dryer. Stenciled fabrics can be washed either by hand or in a machine on a delicate wash, although they can't be dry cleaned after heat sealing and you shouldn't spin or tumble dry. Better to use an old-fashioned washing machine. In bedrooms, beds are always the focal point. It's a very personal room where one can escape from the outside world. Looking around us here, we can see there's a lot of wood. It's on the cupboard doors, the beams, the windows, and all the furniture. The predominant colours are yellow and blue. There's a blue carpet and a yellow duvet cover. The curtains, like the walls, are on a white ground, and this striking design combines both the blues and the yellows with beige accents. The beams, however, restrict the continuous use of a border around the room, so like before, we're going to use the curtain pole as a starting point for the stencil design, which will coordinate with the curtains. Individual elements of the design can then be used on the sloping walls. Finally, as a finishing touch and to enhance the bed, I'm going to stencil the pillowcases in order to bring all the design elements together. Another magical transformation, with the main stenciling above both windows. Although they are different in size and shape, this rose and ribbon stencil looks equally effective, framing both styles of window. I took the blue as the main colour for the ribbons, I stenciled the roses in yellow, and then introduced a blue-green colour for the leaves. The main corner bow is used here to accent a picture between the cupboards, with trailing ribbons flowing out of the base of the picture. Above this door, a chance to use some of the border, which highlights the coordinating tiles in the adjoining bathroom. Butterflies stencilled at random all over the room are the finishing touch that makes this room look so individual, each in a different colour combination, and I've even introduced pink to give extra interest. The blues and yellows stencilled on the white walls provide a perfect balance to the curtains. The corner bow has been used as a central motif here, linking through to the corners trailing around the pole. Here are the stencilled pillowcases. Note how on this coloured ground I stencilled darker green leaves and shaded the yellow flowers with brown. The corner motif used again on a side wall, giving a different look by extending the trailing ribbons and adding a few extra roses. This is Ben's room, and it's a veritable paradise for a small child. One of the things I love about decorating a child's room is it gives one a chance to escape back to one's own childhood. Now, what should we bear in mind when decorating and stenciling a child's room? Firstly, we have to think, how many children are using the room? Is it a bedroom? Is it a playroom? Is it somewhere when they get older they're going to be doing their homework? Now, Ben here is 8, and looking around the room we see that he sleeps in the room, and he uses it for all his hobbies. We see all his books, his organ, everything around us, and then here we come to a board, which at the moment you can see Ben has put a map on, but when the board comes down, you can see later it converts into a train set. It was here that I found the main source of inspiration for decorating Ben's room. He's 8, and he obviously adores trains, and I'm sure Dad spends a lot of time in here too, so we chose trains as our main theme. And the trains are going to follow the line of the wall right the way round using wonderful strong primary colours. Then when we come to the bed, I thought, well, why not introduce a second stencil? There's clouds and rainbows, and as we have the problem here of a sloping ceiling, we're going to put all the clouds and the rainbows and maybe a little bit of smoke coming out of the train all over the sloping ceiling. And then you can see here the lampshade, which also has clouds and rainbows on it, really gives the final link of everything together. The beauty of using stencils in a child's room is that they're cheap, they're very easy to use, an older child can help you stencil too, and when they grow out of them it's so easy to change it into an older theme. Cutting your own stencils is very rewarding, although it does take time and certainly helps if you can draw. Sources of inspiration are all around us. The main thing is to keep it simple, so don't be tempted to start with anything too complicated. I always think it's a good idea to take a commercially pre-cut stencil and study it before embarking on a project. The most successful ideas in any form of design are often the least elaborate, and pre-cut stencils certainly demonstrate this. Think about the design. Is it a motif or a border? How many colours do you want to use, and what size is it to be? Work in a good light. And remember, if you don't like your first efforts, you can always start again. For this stencil project, I'm going to draw and cut the clouds we're going to use in Ben's room to coordinate with his bed linen. Set out all your equipment and draw the basic shape onto a piece of paper using a thick pencil or pen. Then, tape a sheet of clear plastic, matte side facing up, onto a cutting mat over the design on the white paper. Trace the design in a solid line using a waterproof pen. Next, move the plastic along and trace over part of the design dotted lines to form the registration marks. Once that's completed, place the plastic, now with the shiny side up, on the cutting mat and use a sharp craft knife to cut out your stencil. Start the cut by piercing the plastic and always cut the stencil towards you, moving the design round rather than changing the direction of the knife. Follow the outline as closely as possible, and do not worry about any ragged edges. These can be tidied up once the basic design is completed. With this particular design, I'm going to keep the cut-out shape of the cloud, and when we see Ben's room transformed, you'll see why. Trains are on the move, on the board and around the walls. I stenciled a basic track like a border all around the room, then added individual trains along the stenciled track. The stencils I cut from the clouds and rainbow designs are used to great effect on the sloping walls. I used 2 sizes of rainbow and stenciled the clouds in a pale grey blue to show up on the white wall. Note I used the spare piece of cloud and stenciled around it to give a truly cloudy effect. Each engine has been stenciled in black and grey. The wagons are all painted at random in different primary colours to coordinate with the rainbows and all the other colours in the room. I left good-sized gaps between the trains to give a feeling of movement and space to the room. Spare rooms are probably not used that often, so it's important that the decoration makes one's guests feel welcome. They're also great places to use favourite designs that one might not have been able to use elsewhere in the house. Here we have a small but interesting room. Again, the bed is the focal point. We've got white walls, beige carpet, wooden furniture and beams, and set between the sloping ceiling is a very pretty dormer window with curtains that match the duvet. It may be a small room, but I think it gives us great potential to try out some interesting ideas and give our guests a lovely, friendly room to spend the night in. Every room in Richard and Caroline's house has white walls. A good base for decorating plans, but I thought it'd be fun to have coloured walls in at least one of the bedrooms. We chose the spare room and transformed it by sponging the walls pink. Sponging kits are readily available these days, and for a small room, the basic kit contains everything one needs. The room had been painted in emulsion, which is an ideal base for sponging with water-based paints. Susie is wearing protective gloves to keep her hands clean and started by diluting the paint with a little water in a paint tray. A damp, natural sponge is lightly dipped in the paint and the excess wiped off on the side of the tray. Start in a corner by gently passing the sponge on the wall at random, turning your hand to vary the effect. Work around the room, putting more paint on the sponge as you need it, always remembering to wipe off the excess before continuing. The most successful sponging is when the colour is applied unevenly, leaving patches of background showing through the colour. A second colour can be applied once the first coat is dry. Corners and ceiling lines should be left until last, and I usually fill in these areas with a small stencil brush. As a finishing touch, I quite often apply some watered-down white emulsion paint, again at random, which gives a wonderfully translucent effect to the colours beneath. The most important aspect of any DIY project is its planning, and it's absolutely vital to begin your stenciling project by measuring a room accurately. And although this is something that can appear daunting at first, projects can be tackled with confidence by following a simple and methodical action plan. I have chosen a wall to show you how to measure up, but the same principle applies to all repeat pattern stenciling. Start by measuring the total length of the area you intend to stencil. And obviously, the larger the area, the easier it will be to measure if there are two of you. Measure the length of your stencil. The centre of the stencil should be placed in the centre of the wall. This ensures that the same part of the stencil then reaches each corner. It's exactly the same principle that applies to laying floor or wall tiles. Always start from the middle and work out. Calculate how many times the stencil fits into the space. Susie has used a calculator here, but you could also use practice stencil strips of line paper, which would also enable a little colour experimentation and a general idea of how the room will look.
So we've got 70 centimetres.
Return to the wall, mark your central point and bingo, you're ready to go. Prepare your paints and brushes and start stenciling. Begin at the centre, working first towards the left-hand corner. Once this is completed, go back to the centre and work towards the right-hand corner. Do each wall in turn until the room is fully stenciled. We have chosen a combination of blue bows with green and yellow flowers to coordinate with the curtains and duvet cover. To vary the effect, Susie is stenciling using a stippling motion, punting the brush against the wall, combining it with the circular technique I showed you earlier on. Now it's time for the green colour, and this is applied using the second stencil. Working on a coloured surface, it is sometimes necessary to build up more colour as you're stenciling. Also, bear in mind that the eye mixes colour. For example, blue painted on a yellow wall can look green, and equally, green on a red wall can give a green-brown effect. For corners, depending on the design, continue straight round or create a focal point. Here, the two bows meet, leaving the corner bare, but you could also add extra leaves or extend the stencil along the wall to fill the gap. It's amazing what depth the pink sponging has given the white walls, and it's a wonderful background on which to use the stencil. A coloured wall gives an extra dimension to colour coordination. I chose a floral swag design to give height to the room, and the bows continue the ribbon theme I've used in other places throughout the house. The wall by the window had too many nooks and crannies to use this stencil, so we concentrated on the walls around the bed and door. The colours echoed the background and the flowers on the fabric, and all in all, it's in a lovely room which I'm sure no guest will want to leave. There may be times when you want to adapt a one-piece stencil into two or more colours. Decide which part of the design you want in which colour. Here I want a two-colour stencil from this single sheet, blue leaves and red flowers. Using masking tape, cover the areas you have chosen for your second colour, leaving the first colour parts ready for stenciling. Once this has been completed, remove the masking tape. Using new tape this time, mask over all the painted parts of the stencil, in this case now leaving the flowers exposed. Always cut small pieces of tape and ensure all the necessary areas are completely covered. Stencil away. Soon the project is completed with the minimum of effort, and with this stencil, no chance of having red leaves or blue flowers. For your own projects, a simple stencil, or even parts of a multiple stencil, can be separated into as many colours as you require. Bathrooms can either be en suite from the bedroom or separate rooms. Usually there is a lot of wall space in relation to the size of the room, and one's got the obvious restrictions of the bath and the basin. Richard and Caroline's bathroom has two of the walls already tiled, so for the stencil I think it makes sense to pick up the green and red colours and continue the theme around the rest of the room. I think, like a hall, it's important that a bathroom is considered a room in its own right. And if there's enough space, I always love putting in pieces of furniture and then finally accessories, just to make that bathroom look very, very special. In a small room with many short stretches of wall, some at an angle, it was difficult to plan how we were going to stencil. I'd found 2 pre-cut stencils, a border and a motif, that coordinate beautifully with the tile design. Doing one section at a time, I started with the easiest bit, the only long stretch of wall, continuing the tile border on the other side of the door. Next, the motif stencil, used here to give a focal point to the radiator and tile rail. It fits into the scheme as I've used the same colours. Here, the motif, used with the border, gives the window an extra dimension, which in turn coordinates with the floral curtain design. Decorating is really just like a big jigsaw puzzle. You have all the pieces, walls, fabrics, furniture, pictures and accessories. And I always think of stencils as the most important piece that enables all the bits to fit together, forming the completed picture. Here, Susie is showing how to stencil a picture bow. Hang the picture, mark the centre, top and bottom. Stencil the bow twice, and the picture gives the impression of hanging on trailing ribbons. Stenciled in blue, it coordinates both with the blue bows in the bedrooms and the blue carpet. A good example too of how a clever little stencil detail is all that is needed to decorate this landing. On the staircase are those random leaves that have blown up the stairs from down in the hall. To fill this large bare space above the dado panel, I rehung some pictures and created a mini print room. I joined these prints together with a series of coordinating stencils. Ropes, swags, tassels and bows, stenciled in the coordinating colours, fill the space and make the staircase a wonderful focal point and link between the 2 floors. Back down the stairs and you can see how this coordinates with the bows and the border stencil we used here down in the hall. One of the many pleasures of making this video has been knowing the wonderful stenciling ideas and techniques I was going to be able to show you. Our Norfolk house is now totally transformed with so many stenciling ideas you can use in your own home. And this is only the start. Now you know stencils can be used in all rooms, on most surfaces, in any colour, and using designs to suit all lifestyles. No matter how or where you live, there's a stencil for you. Stenciling is cheap, versatile, and using our easy dry brush technique, it's simple and fun to do. Most importantly, stenciling provides you with the chance to express yourself as an artist and to put your own hand-painted individual stamp on your home. I have enjoyed sharing my ideas and techniques with you and showing you there's no limit to what you can achieve. My enthusiasm for stenciling grows every day. Don't wait to get going. Have fun, go crazy. Look at decorating through new eyes and take pleasure and enjoy all the wonderful effects I know you'll be creating. Good luck!